7 wins in a row, gone in 1 hour and 13 minutes. That's how fast it ended. No slow fade, no close battle that could have gone either way. A 6-4, 6-0 defeat. A second set where she won a total of 8 points, and a winning streak that had carried her across 2 countries, snapped in the time it takes to watch a movie. And then, minutes later, Alex Eala walked into a press conference, sat down, and said something that changed the entire conversation around this loss. If this is your first time on this channel, subscribe right now, because we are about to break down exactly what she said, word for word, and what it actually means for her next tournament. This is the kind of update you do not want to be scrolling past 3 days late. Here's what actually happened on that court, because the scoreline alone doesn't tell the full story. Alex Eala walked into Toronto's round of 16, carrying momentum nobody in this sport picks up by accident. 7 straight wins. A first-ever WTA Tour title in Washington, closed out over a rain-delayed final that stretched across 2 separate days. Then Toronto itself, a 3-set battle against Alicia Parks to avenge an old Australian Open loss, followed immediately by a 2-hour and 39-minute marathon against Caty McNally, a match where she rolled her ankle and needed a medical timeout just to finish it. 8 matches, 2 countries, 13 days, and through all of it, 7 wins. Every single outlet covering this stretch used some version of the same phrase to describe what finally caught up with her in Toronto. Ran out of legs. No rest for the weary. The packed schedule appeared to take its toll. None of that is speculation. A first WTA title changes a player's entire calendar overnight, bringing confidence and ranking points, but also new expectations and a workload that doesn't pause to let a young body recover. Eala had been playing the tennis of her life for 2 straight weeks, and eventually, physically, something had to give. It's also worth remembering what this stretch looked like from inside that stadium. For an entire week, Filipino flags filled Sobeys Stadium. Chants of her name rolled through the crowd on every changeover, and by her own admission, the atmosphere had become one of the things fueling her through match after match. Even in defeat, that crowd didn't go anywhere. They stayed, they cheered, and by the time she turned to acknowledge them after the final point, there was no sense of a stadium walking out early on a player who had let them down. If anything, the opposite. Then came Belinda Bencic, a 2020 Olympic gold medalist, a former world number 4, a player who won this exact tournament as an 18-year-old back in 2015. And on this particular night, a player who was simply sharper, fresher, and more precise than anyone Eala had faced on this entire run. There's a strange statistic attached to Bencic that's worth knowing, because it adds another layer to just how difficult this particular matchup was. This win extended her record against left-handed opponents to 10 wins in a row, a streak dating back to 2024. Even Bencic herself seemed genuinely puzzled by it when asked about it afterward. Her words, "I feel like it can't be coincidental, I don't think. It's weird for me as well." Whatever the explanation, mechanical, tactical, or simply matchup luck, Eala walked into a match against a player who has quietly built one of the most dominant streaks in the sport against exactly her style of play. The numbers from the match itself tell the story clearly. Eala was broken in 6 of her 8 service games. Her first serve landed at 53%, compared to Bencic's 67%. She actually fought back from a breakdown to level the first set at 4 games each, genuinely competitive tennis for a stretch, forcing the crowd back to life after Bencic had raced out to an early lead. But Bencic broke again in the 9th game and served it out, 6-4. The second set never got competitive at all. Bencic won it 6-0, closing out the match in just over an hour, converting 6 of her 10 breakpoint chances across the entire encounter, while Eala managed only 2 of her 4. Watching it unfold, there was a specific moment where the match seemed to tip permanently. After leveling that first set, Eala had every reason to believe momentum belonged to her. Instead, Bencic simply raised her own level at exactly the moment it mattered most, the mark of a player with a decade of experience handling precisely that kind of pressure. It wasn't panic that beat Eala that night. It was a more experienced opponent, refusing to let a small opening become a big one. Now here's where this story stops being just another scoreline and becomes something worth actually paying attention to. Because right after that loss, in the press conference every fan was bracing for, Alex Eala said something that reframed the entire 2 weeks. Her exact words, "Tough one today. I think Belinda put me in some really tough situations. She played very well. Overall, really good week. I'm super happy with the run that I've had, going to try and recover and come back out hot." Read that again, slowly. No excuses about the ankle. No mention of exhaustion as a reason she lost, even though every outlet covering this match independently noted how visibly fatigued she looked by the end. No frustration directed at anyone but herself, and even then, not really frustration at all. Just an honest, calm accounting of a really good stretch of tennis that happened to end in a loss to a very good player. That response matters more than people realize, and here's why. A lot of young athletes, even talented ones, don't yet have the emotional tools to separate a result from their own self-worth. A bad loss after a big win can spiral fast, questioning everything that came before it, letting one difficult night erase 2 genuinely great weeks. Eala did the opposite. She kept the 2 weeks and the 1 loss as separate things entirely. One good, one tough, both true at the same time. That kind of compartmentalizing is not something coaches can install through drills. It tends to come from somewhere quieter, years of losses that happened long before anyone was watching, small disappointments absorbed and processed without an audience, until a player simply learns that one result, good or bad, was never going to be the whole story. Watching a 21-year-old already speak with that kind of perspective, minutes after the toughest loss of an otherwise historic stretch, says something about how she's built that goes well beyond her forehand or her serve. And then, almost as if to prove just how unbothered she actually was, she was asked what she planned to do with her downtime before the next tournament. Her answer, and I promise this is real, "I definitely will take maybe 2 days off, a day or two. I do have to travel to Cincinnati. I need to get a haircut. I haven't gotten a haircut in a while. My nails are grown out. So yeah, I'll do a couple things, just to get my mind off tennis." A haircut, grown out nails. That's what a 21-year-old who just snapped a 7-match winning streak chose to talk about, minutes after walking off that court. That's not deflection. That's someone who has already made peace with the result before she even sat down at that podium. Even Belinda Bencic, the woman who just ended her run, seemed to understand exactly what she'd walked into that night. Speaking to a stadium that had spent the entire match cheering for her opponent, Bencic said this, "I know most of you guys were cheering for Alex, but I still have to say it was very nice to play in front of you all. Thank you so much for the great crowd tonight." Even in defeat, Eala had built something in that stadium powerful enough for her opponent to acknowledge it directly, out loud, to a crowd that wasn't hers. Now let's get to the part you actually clicked for. What happens next? Here's the number that puts this entire loss into perspective. Despite crashing out in the round of 16, Alex Eala's ranking did not fall. She holds steady at a career-high world number 20, the same ranking she carried into this tournament after her Washington title. Her points total actually climbed, up to 2,216, after picking up 120 points across her 2 wins in Toronto. A loss that snapped a winning streak still left her season stronger than it was 2 weeks ago. And she was remarkably clear-eyed about turning this specific loss into fuel. Her own words on it, "I'm taking the lessons that I've had from these 2 weeks, and hopefully implementing them even more in a better way in Cincinnati and New York." Cincinnati and New York. Let's talk about both, because this is where her season gets even more interesting. The Cincinnati Open runs from August 13th through the 23rd, and this will be Alex Eala's tournament debut at this event. She was originally supposed to play it last year, but had to withdraw because of a shoulder injury. This year, she walks in for the first time ever, at a career-high ranking, fresh off a title and a 7-match streak, even with this 1 loss attached to the end of it. And the field waiting for her there is genuinely brutal. Defending champion Iga Swiatek, Aryna Sabalenka, Elena Rybakina, Naomi Osaka, the very player Eala beat in the semifinals in Washington just 2 weeks ago, and Coco Gauff, who Bencic herself now moves on to face in the Toronto quarterfinals. Think about the sheer density of that field for a second. 4 Grand Slam champions and an Olympic medalist, all in the same draw Eala is about to walk into, on the back of a 2-day rest period after one of the most physically demanding stretches of her career. There's something fitting about Cincinnati specifically being her next stop, too. This is a tournament that has already denied her once, a withdrawal she had no control over, an injury that simply took the decision out of her hands. Walking back in now, healthy enough to compete, ranked higher than she has ever been, carrying real tour-level pedigree instead of just promise, is its own small piece of unfinished business, separate entirely from anything that happened against Bencic. After Cincinnati comes the biggest stage of them all, the US Open, the final Grand Slam of the season, in a city that is home to one of the largest Filipino communities anywhere in the world, outside the Philippines itself. So here's the honest picture heading into the next few weeks. A 21-year-old who just authored the best 2-week stretch of her career, a maiden WTA title and back-to-back deep runs across 2 different countries, followed by a loss that, by her own account, taught her something rather than broke her. A career-high ranking that survived the defeat intact. And 2 of the biggest tournaments left on the calendar standing directly in front of her, one of which she's never even played before. If Washington and Toronto proved anything, it's that Alex Eala does not need a perfect run to keep climbing. She needed one really good stretch, one honest loss, and one clear-headed answer in a press conference to remind everyone watching exactly why they believed in her in the first place. She didn't promise revenge. She didn't promise a title in Cincinnati. She simply said she'd take the lessons, recover, and come back out hot. Sometimes that's a far more convincing answer than any guarantee could have been, because guarantees get forgotten the moment they're broken, while an honest, grounded plan tends to actually get followed through. There's a broader pattern worth noticing here too, one that stretches back further than just these 2 weeks. Every single time this season that Alex Eala has faced a setback, a tough loss on clay early in the year, a shoulder injury that cost her a tournament, a heartbreaking near miss at a previous final, she has responded the same way. Not with drama, not with excuses, with work. That pattern is now long enough to stop being a coincidence and start being a genuine identity. So here's my honest question for you before you go. Do you think this loss actually helps her heading into Cincinnati and the US Open, the way a real reset sometimes does? Or do you think the fatigue from these 2 weeks is going to follow her into Ohio? Drop your take in the comments. Genuinely curious where this channel's community lands on it, because these predictions are always more interesting to revisit once we actually know the answer. And if you want to be here for every match of that Cincinnati debut, against a field this loaded, make sure you're subscribed, because we will have you covered from the very first ball she strikes, not a recap pieced together days later. This channel exists to catch these moments as they happen, and that only works if you're already here when they do. Because whatever happens next, one thing is already clear from everything she said this week. Alex Eala isn't rattled. She's just getting a haircut.